everyone, it's Aspen, your host for Forestry Talks, a podcast that explores all things forestry in Alberta. I'm really excited to be here on site at the Banff Fairmont Springs Hotel for our 82nd annual general meeting and conference. We've got a ton of great guests here. There's so much networking. We're having a great time, and I'm really looking forward to bringing some of those guests on this show for you to listen to. So stay tuned. We're going to have a great week. I can't wait to share it with you. Hey everyone, it's Aspen, your host for Forestry Talks, a podcast that explores all things forestry in Alberta. I'm really excited to be kicking off our super special AGM series with Minister Todd Loewen, the Minister of Forestry and Parks in Alberta. And Minister, you were a return guest.
Yes,
you are my first return guest. I'm so excited. Thanks for coming back.
Happy to be here. Appreciate it. That was fun last time. Looking forward to more of the same this time.
Absolutely. And so this is, of course, now your second AGM. You've had a little bit more time in the role, a little bit more time in the sector. So tell me a little bit about what that's been like.
You know, there's always so much to learn, and there's such an incredible wealth of knowledge in the forestry industry. And I guess it's just every time I turn around, I learn more about the positive aspects about the forest industry and its effects on the landscape and how it really helps out all Albertans as far as helping with manage the forest and taking care of those things that a lot of people don't think about that I never thought about either before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so last year, of course, a big focus of our conversation was the historic 2023 wildfire season. I think it's the first time the province of Alberta has declared a state of emergency, if I'm not mistaken on that. So some lessons learned from that. We had, of course, another challenging wildfire season, but maybe some changes. Can you talk to me a little bit about what happened this year?
Yeah, so last year was definitely it was the biggest year in history that we'd recorded history. So we knew we had to do some changes and to accommodate kind of a bit of a changing landscape. And we started the wildfire season early. We made sure we hired more wildland firefighters, more contractors, and we brought on more night vision helicopters. More water bombers, and again we added over 55% more to the budget from last year compared to this year. So it was a huge difference there with the budget, and that just allowed us to be so much better prepared for the wildfire season, and again being ready earlier. Because it just seems like the wildfire season starts earlier and earlier all the time, and so we that allowed us to do that. And even like when we're actually in the middle of fire season, we're spending contingency dollars. It's actually not the budget dollars. The budget dollars gets us prepared and gets the people hired, but then it's contingency that comes in and takes care of those expenses. And we increased the contingency budget by over 33% also. Going into this season. So that just made it so we were, I think, a lot more prepared, a lot more ready, and in the end, I think it made a big difference. Yeah,
absolutely. And I know, of course, there was lots of close collaboration with communities, lots of close collaboration with industry who really understands, the forest really well in the province. So you're saying you saw a lot of success in that program. Talk to me a little bit more about that. Like, how did these new changes and programs really help with the wildfire response this year?
The fighting fire at night has been is a real game changer.
Yeah.
We know that a wildfire that at 10 p.m. in the evening, the flames could be 100 meters high even, and a raging inferno. That same fire, 3 o'clock in the morning, once the temperature drops, humidity comes up, it could be a meter high, the flames, and so much easier to manage. But if you're not out there fighting at that time, then you can't take advantage of that. And so the night vision helicopters made a difference there, to be able to have them going, all night long and doing water drops all night long. And then also they were able to keep an eye on crews that we had working all night too. So we had dozer crews working all night. We actually had ground crews working at night too. And that just gave us that opportunity to take advantage of that time period when traditionally has been considered too dangerous to do. But with the new technology that we have now and just a better system in place to handle that, we were able to take advantage of that, and it made a huge difference.
No kidding. And I mean, we saw, I'm sure this year as well, but certainly last year, there were some remarkable instances where fires moved incredible distances from, one day to the next overnight. And you're dealing with a whole brand new situation the next day. So
yeah, exactly. And so some of the technology too with the drones, being able to do thermal imaging at night.
Yeah.
So again, that would between the drones doing the thermal imaging at night and also the night vision helicopters going out at night. That way, when the crews, the main crew started in the morning, they knew exactly where to go. They knew where all the hot spots were. They knew where what the fire had done overnight. Without normally they would just go out blind almost every morning and try to find the front line of the fire and where they were going to be fighting. But this way, they were all prepared right from the start.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, yeah. So lots of lessons learned from 2023, lots of really impactful changes that were brought in 2024. Yeah. We, of course, can't talk about the 2024 wildfire season without talking about Jasper. And that was a little bit of a unique situation. Can you talk to me about some of the challenges with that community?
Yeah. So when it comes to the Jasper wildfire, Jasper National Park is part of Parks Canada. Parks Canada has their own firefighting teams, their own firefighting contractors and things like that. Mm-hmm. And so they take control of those fires that happen in the national parks, even the parks within Alberta. And so, we were basically there to lend support and we did. Mm-hmm. From the time the fire started, we had equipment, we had personnel there on the fire. Yep. We provided everything that they requested and made sure that when that fire broke out, we started moving some of our equipment and personnel into proximity so that when they did ask for the help, the help was there. We didn't have to bring it from across Alberta. And so that was, we did everything we could there. But again, just a little bit more of a challenge because it wasn't in our direct control in Alberta wildfire. It was Parks Canada.
Yeah. No, understandable. And I think one of the things coming out of that is really the spotlight it's putting on the conversation of, wildfire, forest management at a national, at an international level. You, of course, were just shared a testimony in the House of Commons. Can you talk to me about that? Yeah,
so no, it's interesting to see the difference between, when it comes to forest management within a national park and outside of the national park. We had the pine beetles when they hit Alberta, as the government in conjunction with industry and municipalities, we fought the pine beetle. We made sure that the forest industry was harvesting those pine beetle killed trees, and even some of the ones that we knew that were kind of next in line for pine beetle, just to kind of reduce the opportunity for the pine beetle to spread and to create that damage. And that kind of attack wasn't necessarily done in the national parks. Mm-hmm. And so when that fire started in Jasper, the fuel load there, the dead pine beetle trees mixed with the evergreens that were still alive there, made for an incredibly hot fire and fast moving fire.
Yeah, absolutely. And so salvage harvesting pine beetle kill, of course, is a really important part of managing fuel loads. But interestingly, I think something we heard in the panel this morning as well is that salvage harvesting wood after a burn is just as important, and that with these prolonged seasons of drought that actually they're not creating fire breaks. They're actually posing an increased fire risk. So there's been a lot of work with harvesting fire salvage in the province this year. I think we've had some members run for the entire year, their product on fire salvage.
Exactly. And as a government, forestry department, we wanted to make sure that they took as much as they possibly could to make sure we took full advantage of it, because it's only good on the landscape for about a year and a half. Yeah. And then it deteriorates to the point where it doesn't have much value. And when they do harvest it, then the forest companies are responsible to reforest too. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of helps the whole process move along. So it's important to have the forest industry involved in that, and I appreciate all that they did, and I'm hoping we can get even more off the landscape of those burnt trees from last year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's kind of really interesting about this conversation is people sometimes look at this as the harvesting as the intervening, but I've heard lots of people recognize really importantly that actually intervening has been preventing wildfires from coming across the landscape for decades, and so how that's put the province in a unique situation.
Yeah, and a great point. We've been suppressing fire for decades here in Alberta and across Canada and around the world. And what that has done is created an unnatural landscape. The age of the forest that we have across the province is much older than it would have been naturally. Yeah. Naturally, there would have been wildfires coming through regularly. First Nations would have been doing their burns that create habitat for the wildlife. And of course, that hasn't happened in Alberta for 70, 80 years. And so now we have this unnatural landscape that's actually very prone to catastrophic wildfire. that's very hard to control. And so, and that's exactly what we do with the forest industry, is that what the forest industry does as far as harvesting the trees off the landscape, it kind of replaces that natural process of fire. And we like to talk about doing prescribed burns and things like that because we know that's part of a natural process too. But the window to do prescribed burns is so small. You got to make sure you're prepared with the fire guard around. You got to make sure you got personnel and equipment to keep the fire, make sure it doesn't get out of control. And then you have to wait for the right window of weather to make it all happen. And sometimes we'll prepare an area and it might take a year or 2 years or 3 years to get that right window of opportunity. So we can't continue to wait to do prescribed burns. We have to do some mechanical clearing to try to take some of that old forest off the landscape and break it up a bit so there's a little bit more of a mosaic on the landscape instead of all just a single class age structure of the forest.
Yeah, absolutely. A more resilient, more diverse range of age classes is so instrumental.
Exactly. It was interesting last year when I was up in a helicopter watching one of the wildfires. I was able to fly over an area and we could see the front line of the fire as it was moving across the landscape, and we could see where it hit a previous cut block from a few years before. And the fire just stopped there.
Wow.
And it was moving around that. And what was also interesting is there was a little clump of trees in the middle that was left for whatever reason.
Yeah.
It was on fire.
The retention patch, likely. Yeah.
And so some sparks had come over and landed in that little patch, and it was on fire. But the rest of the fire had to move right around that whole cut block because there wasn't the fuel load to be able to burn there.
Yeah.
And that's the true advantage of having that. The forest industry taking out some of those older stands of trees and creating those natural fire breaks.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when we look at some of the biggest factors that add to wildfire risk or the things that cause fire, it's weather.
Yeah.
It's topography. Yeah. And it's fuels.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know about you, Minister, but I don't have a magic wand that can control the weather.
And not me.
And nor do I have an ability to change the topography. Yeah. And so what is the only factor that we can manage in that instance? And it's fuels.
Yeah. Exactly. So that's why the forest industry is so important. I mean, it's important for our economy. It's important for jobs. It's important for rural Alberta. But it's also important for our actual forest for its just to keep that balance in the forest.
How has this changed the conversation about forests and forest management at a provincial and a national level?
I think this some of these large fires, like last season in particular, I think it showed a lot of people opened their eyes and realized, okay, what's going on here? What do we need to do? And then when we lose communities, like last year, we lost, several communities suffered losses of homes, and that's horrible to see, and it's tough to see the effect on the people. But Jasper, I think, was another eye opener, and I think 2 years in a row like this that have shown people that the devastation that wildfire can do, and maybe a bit of an understanding now of things that we can do to mitigate.
Yeah.
And that again is creating those fire breaks, changing the age structure of the forest, making community fire guards, and having the forest industry come out and harvest some of those trees, maybe do some thinning and things like that, and so that we can actually get that fire, like the fire that hit Jasper, a type 5 fire coming in at a high speed, and it's going treetop to treetop. If we can drop that fire to the ground, then it's far easier for our firefighters to fight.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I want to switch gears a little bit, Minister. Of course, it's still a little bit related, but a lot of people have been exploring how some of the policies, as it relates to species at risk, might have implications when it comes to wildfire management. So I'm wondering if you can comment on that at all.
Yeah, it's interesting. When it comes to, in particular, caribou, for instance, and they need an older type forest in order for their natural habitat and feeding and things like that. But and so I think there's a lot of push, in particular from the federal government and the Species at Risk Act and Section 11 agreements and things like that they want to leave those trees on the landscape completely. But we know that those are the most susceptible to fire.
Yeah.
And if a fire starts in some of those places, it's going to be near impossible to stop the fire, and it's going to burn all that caribou habitat. But we know that if we use the forest industry and we break up some of that a bit, so that we can have places where that fire won't be able to take out that whole area, then that's far better for our species at risk, our endangered species like the caribou, and it's better for the landscape as a whole.
Yeah, well, and some of the things that I'm hearing from industry and from the provincial government as it relates to species at risk is the importance of a Made in Alberta solution, a Made in Alberta approach. So talk to me about why that's important and how we can use that as a tool for species recovery.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we governments tend to think that their decisions they make far away from the landscape where it happens is best, and we know that decisions made closer to the people affected and the landscape affected are always better decisions. And so we look at the things like species at risk, and I know myself, I'm concerned about the species at risk. I know the forest industry, I know they're concerned about the species at risk. When I talk to the forest industry, they talk about it as with concern, not disdain, our species at risk. And so they want to be able to manage the forest and manage it for multiple reasons, like not only for their business, but also for the species at risk and also for Albertans as a whole. Yeah. And so we know that we can come up with solutions to some of these problems. And again, the solutions that the forest industry and Alberta government would come up with, I think would be far better than what the federal government would do.
Well, and I think there's so much value when it comes to local knowledge, local expertise, within a province, but then even getting a little bit more granular. I know that there's such a difference between some of the forests that we have in the northern parts of the province versus the southern part of the province. And so the folks that, work and live and play in those forests every single day are going to have a bit more of an intimate understanding about how they work, who's using the forest, what wildlife are and how.
Exactly.
And I think there's so much value in using that knowledge to drive solutions.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, you have a town hall meeting and you just get a group of people from the area together and that are concerned, and you'll be amazed at what you can learn and the different aspects that they bring up at these meetings. And that's that kind of Made in Alberta solutions. Getting back to the grassroots, getting back to the people that are on the landscape, the trappers, the First Nations, the hunters, the outfitters, the people that recreate on the landscape. I mean, they're all concerned about the endangered species too. Yes, they want to do their activities, but there's a way to do it. They're not mutually exclusive. They can be done together and done in a way that's sustainable. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think the province has already seen success with grizzly bear recovery. I mean, that's something that Alberta worked together to achieve, and we've seen great success with that program.
Exactly. Yes, there's more grizzlies than there's been for probably hundreds of years in Alberta, and they're in areas that that they probably haven't been seen for hundreds of years.
Right.
And some of those areas are probably concerning, I think, to a lot of people.
Okay.
Because they're getting into areas that are far more populated and creating those issues.
So we've done too good of a job.
Yeah, in a way, we're somewhat a victim of our own success there, and maybe. I think maybe part of the problem is we knew what we wanted to do. We wanted to increase the grizzly bear population, but I don't know if we really thought about what that really meant on the landscape. Where would they go?
Right.
And I know where I live, growing up there, spending my whole life there, 30, 40 years ago, never seen a grizzly. Now the grizzlies are literally everywhere.
Oh, wow. At the end of the day, I still think it is a good story in terms of how we've all come together to recover a species that, the numbers were a concern. What type of learnings do you think we can take from that and apply to, other wildlife like caribou, like trout, like others that we want to make sure we're being sensitive to?
Yeah. And I think when it comes to the, how we done with grizzly bears, it was a whole society, endeavor to make that happen. Industry knew what needed to be done. Everybody worked together on that, and I think it's the same with caribou and the other endangered species. We look at some of the fish species that are endangered and protecting them and making sure that they thrive on the landscape. And again, industry is so. I guess they come up with so many good ideas to get a job done.
Yeah.
And I guess I always think of a better mousetrap. They're always coming up with something new. And when I see some of how they do stream crossings now compared to how they've done stream crossings 30 years ago, I mean, enormous difference.
Absolutely.
And the difference it makes to the trout and the landscape too.
Yeah. So. And, I mean, there's such a culture and a commitment to continuous improvement in the sector as well. Yeah. I think, we're always trying to do better, and we're always trying to learn more and apply the best available science to make sure that we're doing the right things. So yeah, I see a lot of that. I want to ask you, Minister, I know, of course, you are a great advocate of the species at risk and making sure that we're being sensitive to species recovery. But of course, this portfolio is not really entirely yours. Like, there's a lot of collaboration between you and Minister Schultz in the Environment Department. So talk to me a little bit about how that works and having two different ministries working on this type of file.
So it has been really good. Minister Schultz has been a great advocate for industry and for common sense approaches to how we deal with wildlife and how we deal with species at risk. She's not scared to stand up to Ottawa when it comes to pushing back on some of their unreasonable expectations, and so that's been great. And my office has been able to work with her office great. There's no problems there. She's had some meetings with the forestry industry, and I know the forest industry has been very excited about those meetings and happy with the kind of language that Minister Schultz uses when in discussing these issues. So I think we have a friend in Minister Schultz with environment and protected areas, and I think it's a great relationship.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that. And it sounds like the conference people are starting to pour out, so it's getting a little bit louder here.
Exactly.
So maybe before I let you go, Minister, just is there anything in particular that you're looking forward to or most love about this conference? Or is there any kind of closing thoughts that you have that you want to share with listeners to the show?
I think as far as thoughts for the listeners, I think, myself, around my home, I want to see as many trees as possible. I like the forest and I like that. And I know a lot of people, when they go out and recreate or even at their home, they want to see the forest. They want to see it the way they see it today. And I guess we kind of think that it's going to be like that forever. And it's not, and again, a lot of what we see isn't natural. If we look at the Bow Valley, like we're at right here, if you see a picture from, I seen one from 1898 to this valley, it didn't look nothing like what it looks like now.
Right.
I mean, it was just an open grassland with some spotted trees across it. Beautiful habitat for wildlife. I think it's beautiful too. And so I think sometimes we as the people of Alberta have kind of unrealistic expectations for what the landscape should look like and how it shouldn't change. And I think we need to realize that we can do a couple different things. We can have prescribed burns. We can have some mechanical harvest of trees, or we can have a catastrophic wildfire come and wipe it all out at once.
Right.
And so we have to make some choices there and be realistic in our expectations there. And as far as the conference here, again, as I meet with people, I've got meetings all this afternoon for multiple organizations, and always so much for me to learn. Again, this wasn't, I had an outdoor background, but not a forestry background, so lots for me to learn, and I just appreciate the discussions with everybody. So.
Awesome. Right on. Well, Minister, thank you again for joining me on the show, and we so appreciate all of the work that you do with our industry.
No problem. Thank you very much. I appreciate it too, Aspen.
Thanks for joining me for another episode of Forestry Talks, a podcast that explores all things forestry in Alberta. If you're curious to learn more, check out our website, albertaforestproducts.ca or loveabforest.ca. I'm your host, Aspen Dudzik, and I'll see you next time.
This series is proudly produced by the team at Road 55. Road 55 creates content that connects. For more information, visit our website at road55.ca.